The Washington Post published a bit of a scatterbrained piece on retail theft in America. And I thought it was worth talking about because there was one excerpt in particular that's getting a lot of negative attention. But I wanted to do a more broader discussion on the topic of retail theft and why it is that there seems to be two different narratives playing out in the country, with some arguing that this is completely made up, it's not really taking place, and others arguing, no, this is definitely a problem, and that's the reason why certain stores are locking up their merchandise or stores are shutting down entirely due to the shoplifting and the retail theft that they're experiencing. Now, the piece in question is titled "The Zombie CVS: A Late Capitalism Horror Story. How one Washington, D.C. drugstore got spun by the culture wars into a symbol for America's shoplifting panic." The writer is Maura Judkis, and just based on the subheadline alone, you would get the impression that it's just meant to kind of downplay the occurrence of retail theft in the country. But that's not really the case. In some portions, on one hand, the piece seems to make excuses or provide cover for retail thefts, which have led to certain stores shuttering in big cities across the country. But then in other portions, she also seems to acknowledge the consequences of these crimes. So I don't know if she's trying to do a balancing act here and she's kind of failing in doing so. But I do know that, in my opinion, the dumbest excerpt was what I'm about to read you. "America is a sticky-fingered nation built on stolen land, and its current moral panic is about shoplifting." I get that she's trying to make a point about the founding of this country and what happened to Native Americans. Can we just focus at the topic at hand and just be evidence-based in how we're relaying the information to people?
So,
are you justifying the crimes because this is stolen land? And if you are, why do people who currently live today and had nothing to do with what happened to Native Americans have to suffer the consequences of what happened many, many, many generations ago?
Yeah, I don't think she's making that point because that's even too nonsensical for this piece. Because it's not like the Native Americans are doing the theft, it's other randos that are doing the theft. So what does it have to do with, it's not like it's reparations for Native Americans. So I think the point she's making is that America has a culture of theft.
Yeah, that is what she's saying.
Okay,
yes.
But those guys who stole back then or from hundreds of years ago, okay, let's say that it's seeped into the culture, etc. You think that's why people are going into a CVS and taking stuff because they're like, oh, well, I remember when we took the Native American land and this is just part of my culture, so I could just take stuff. If you made a cultural point about guns, okay, yeah, there's some logic to that. And you could see that clearly that America is obsessed with guns and has been historically. But people don't go around going like, hey, America's pro-theft, so everybody teach your kids to be thieves. That's not a thing that happens, and culture is passed down through the generations. So it's just a totally ridiculous point. And if you're trying to defend the idea that there isn't that much crime, number one, you should look at stats and facts, which we're about to show you. Number two, you should try to make sensible points. We might have millions of people watching this show, but you can be the difference maker because we just need 1% of our audience to be paid members, and then this show can be around forever. So you can make that difference. Click join now.
Look, and part of the problem is the way that the stats are collected happens to be pretty flawed, and we're gonna get into that in just a moment. But before we do, let me do her piece a little bit of justice and finish the rest of that excerpt that I was reading to you. She also says that all over the country, from sea to shining CVS, there are concerns about petty theft, which some retailers claim is worse than ever before. Videos of brazen thefts have gone viral. It has become a political talking point and a political liability. And she is right about it becoming a political liability, particularly in certain parts of the country that are impacted by this more than other parts of the country. So I think that's where the disconnect is, right? If you look at the stats coming from cities like New York City or Los Angeles, yes, this is a big problem, or San Francisco is another example. It is a problem. But if you are a Democratic voter who's living in a different part of the country where you are not experiencing this, you shouldn't make the argument that what your lived experience is in your town is exactly what's happening in the rest of the country, because that's just not the case.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that she brought up the political thing as a way of saying, signaling to people, remember, it's the Republicans who are saying that crime is a problem. So if you're a good Democrat, you have to pretend that crime is not a problem. I don't think that helps the Democratic Party at all. I think that really, really hurts the Democratic Party to say to people, you know how as a society we told African Americans for hundreds of years, when they would say, hey, the cops are abusing us, we would say, we don't believe you, right? Society at large said that.
Where are the statistics? Where are the stats on that?
Yeah, and whenever the cops went on in front of a jury, the jury would be, basically told the cop, you have to believe the cops. Right. Never, and I kept saying like, so millions of people, they all lied for hundreds of years. That's insane. But now Democrats are making that same mistake by going to communities and saying, we don't believe you that you're terrorized by crime.
It's a right-wing narrative.
It's a right-wing narrative, and it's part of our tradition, and like these crazy points. And they're trying to browbeat minority communities that are suffering the most from this crime. Hey, you better not support Republicans. Being anti-crime is supporting Republicans.
This is just
so you have to pretend that you're not being robbed. And the guy's like, but I am being robbed.
Look, I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but the gaslighting that I'm noticing by Democratic politicians on certain issues, and I think it's because they would rather be in denial than to address these difficult issues. These are difficult issues. So I think a good example is honestly the interview that AOC did on MSNBC recently, where they're discussing the migrant crisis. Guys, the migrant crisis is real. Like, you see it, it's impacting blue cities now. You have these Democratic strongholds with the people living in those communities now speaking out, and they're enraged about the situation because they don't have the resources to deal with the migrant crisis adequately, right? Then you have AOC go on MSNBC and say, there is no migrant crisis, this is just a right-wing narrative. That's not smart politics. It's not a good strategy. You can't put your head in the sand and pretend like, no, this is all made up, and it's all made up by nefarious right-wing figures. No, it's a real problem, and it's a problem that Congress needs to respond to adequately.
Yeah, and on that, see, let's take real quick on that, and on that example. So you don't have to agree with Trump's policies, which is what Joe Biden is doing. Joe Biden is begging Donald Trump, please let me do your policies. And it looks pathetic and it's terrible politics, but you can come up with your own policies to handle immigration, crime, and they could be humane and effective, right? But instead of doing that, AOC is going out there saying, I don't see any immigration problem. But wait a minute, the stats are in. Back when Biden's numbers were very similar to Trump's numbers and Trump's numbers were very similar to Obama's numbers, we would show you the numbers and we would tell you, you see this the whole thing of a scaremongering about the caravan is nonsense, right? But now the numbers under Biden over the last couple of years have been in the stratosphere. They are way different. It is a real problem, and telling people to ignore reality is terrible policy and terrible politics.
Now I want to go to other portions of this piece because again, the reason why I call it scatterbrained is because in some portions seems like she's downplaying it. Other portions seems like she totally acknowledges how much it's impacting people, including workers who tend to lose their jobs when these store closures happen. So she writes that some shoplifters view it as a form of anti-capitalist social activism. But as activism, it's rather ineffective, more likely to harm a store's lower paid workers than the chain's chief executive, Karen Lynch, who was paid $21.3 million in 2022, according to CVS regulatory filings. And by the way, she's totally right about that. In fact, an expert that she cited in the piece said, quote, when you're stealing from that store, you are in fact stealing from those employees in a sense, because it does impact their livelihood. Then in other parts of the piece, she kind of minimizes the severity of the issue, writing that theft has gotten worse in some cities, but better in others. That part's true. It's either underreported or over-exaggerated, depending on whether you're asking a corporation or a bureaucracy. Anecdotes and vibes have filled in the gaps. No, but it's not just vibes that have filled in the gaps. It depends on who you're talking to, and if they're coming from a certain part of the country or certain cities in the country, it's very likely that their concerns are well-founded in the statistics and the facts, right? And that's the thing that drives me crazy. So like the fact that that isn't acknowledged, right? That the concerns of people in certain parts of the country who are experiencing a significant increase in that crime are just kind of being ignored or brushed away as like hysterical people who shouldn't be listened to. According to a retail theft expert and criminal justice professor, his name is Carl Langhorst, he says that crimes aren't always reported to authorities, and that has led to huge flaws in the statistics that we're seeing. So in many cases, law enforcement doesn't respond because they don't have the resources to do so. Retail theft expert Carl Langhorst says some jurisdictions don't make it easy for retailers to file reports online too. So now the perception becomes, from a retailer's perspective, why waste my time reporting if nothing is going to get done about it? And he is correct about that. So the Marshall Project even did a pretty good report on this in late 2023, and they found that half of all crimes, both property crimes and nonviolent crimes, never get reported to authorities. And to understand why that's the case, you have to look into how the Justice Department collects its crime stats. And so there's two main ways they do so. One way is through the FBI's crime reporting program. The second way, and the crime reporting program is basically collecting data from local police departments in order to come up with, the crime statistics that they then share in a year-end report. The problem is that information is devastatingly incomplete because a lot of local police departments do not share their data with the FBI as it's compiling its report. The second way, though, is through the Bureau of Justice Statistics Crime Victimization Survey. So while the FBI tries to collect crime data directly from more than 18,000 police agencies through its Uniform Crime Reporting Program, the National Crime Victimization Survey interviews 150,000 families across the country. So the NCVS asks questions that capture crimes that were not reported to police as well as ones that were. So it's more comprehensive data that you should be focusing on to get a more holistic picture of what's happening. So the Justice Department's crime victimization survey shows millions of violent and property crimes were never reported to the police, often because the victim reported the incident to another authority, like a school official, or because they don't think the police would take the matter seriously. Some crimes that are reported to the police never end up in the police report and would not be counted by the FBI's crime statistics. So I really do feel like this is part of the reason why there's a disconnect. Not all cities are impacted by this equally, and there's also a problem in how the crime statistics are reported, or a problem in what news agencies decide to focus on when it comes to the statistics.
Yes, so let me give you some last set of amazing facts from me. I think that the phenomena that Anna's talking about is really amazing because they explain that the disparity between reported crimes and actual crimes was never higher than in between 2021 and 2022. So that means people have stopped reporting crimes at record rates. And so the reason why is obvious. They're frustrated that the cops never come. If they do come, they let the guys off immediately. And the cops say, hey, it's not us, it's the prosecutors. And the answer is it's probably a little bit of both. And so to give you a sense of how much crime is not reported, only 41% of violent crimes were reported. So the majority of violent crimes are never even reported, okay? So that's where we are today. So, and that begins to explain why people go, hey, I see the crime numbers are going up, generally speaking, but sometimes it doesn't seem like they're going up that much.
Right, it's just vibes. You're just scared. You're just a scared person. You're paranoid. This isn't real. Right. It's all in your head. Yeah.
So first of all, it's not true that it isn't going up by that much. When you take Kansas and Alaska into account, yes, then it becomes less pronounced. But when you look at a major city, you see giant jumps up. So let me give you Washington's numbers. Last year in the district, homicides rose by 35%. Robberies rose by 67% in 1 year. And vehicle thefts rose by 82%. Those are stunning numbers. So crime is way up in the cities, and we don't even know how bad it is because the great majority of people are not even reporting the crimes because they're so frustrated. So stop saying there isn't crime. You're gaslighting people and you're driving them crazy, and they're getting twice as angry at you. So when you see Biden losing 21% of black voters out of nowhere, like over the course of 2 years. When you see Biden lost the entire Democratic advantage among Latinos, and now Biden and Trump is tied with Latinos. The guy who said that they were rapists and criminals. One of the reasons is because we keep telling minority communities that are the biggest victims of this crime that they're imagining it and that they should just shut up and vote for Democrats. And that is a terrible strategy. Meanwhile, the Republicans, you can't seem to get out of their own way. The Republican congressman did some weirdo anti-Semitic tweet against the lady who wrote this article.
He liked an anti-Semitic tweet, yeah.
What are you doing? What does that have to do with this? They can't help themselves. The minute anybody goes, man, the Democrats are really bad on this, you turn to the Republicans and they're like, a Jewish person wrote that. What? What does that have to do with anything?
So stupid.
Oh, so dumb. So yes, guys, unfortunately, as usual, we're stuck between two pretty bad options these days.